just networks on the internet. Got questions? Grab a chair. Office hours, keep it real in here. When you come downtown today, LinkedIn, pursue networking. Let your voice be heard. Say what you mean. Grow your brand. Chase that dream. Chase that dream. Chase that dream. Not just sales or trends we chase. We're here for purpose, power, and grace. Every hustle has a heartbeat, every post a spark, but connection is the light that cuts the dark. Oh, Shane drops gems that'll shift your view. Call and ask the questions that bring out truth. Got questions? Grab a chair. Office hours, keep it real in here. When you come downtown today, LinkedIn, pursue networking. Let your voice be heard. Say what you mean. Grow your brand. Chase that dream. Chase that dream. Clock in, dreams up. Let the questions roll. Got a story, got a vision, got a burning goal. We don't fake it, we create it step by step. Building bridges, not just networks on the internet. Got questions? Grab a chair. Office hours, keep it real in here. When you come down.
Yo, yo, yo.
Hey, Colin, man, I'm vibing with that song. We figured it out how to share our theme song with the world. Office
it's
hours, it's like funky.
yeah,
Right?
it's getting the energy up for what we need. Good
Yeah,
to see you again. Welcome back.
yeah, thank you. How did you get the Backstreet Boys to voice that song?
Actually, One Direction.
One Direction. Oh, even better.
Um,
Contract.
yeah, I'm trying to cater to the next generation of boy bands, or I guess that's the current, actually former. I feel like the society is kind of ready for the next boy band.
hmm Right now it's K-pop, so we need to
That's
get a
true.
version of that song done by what's that band called? Their name
BTS.
starts with BTS. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We need BTS to do a song, a version for us.
Well, once we launch the software and elevate the business, maybe that's possible. But for today, we'll have the friendly robots help us out.
All right, cool.
Welcome back. Happy to partake in another episode. How was your weekend? How was it since we last spoke?
Weekend was eventful. I
Yeah, what
got
was it?
down and dirty over the weekend with a business partner. We went to the countryside over in northeast Jamaica, and he has a retail business, and so I helped him to get some new contacts, help him to get out there and tap into the market, penetrate the market, and get some feedback and get some contacts. So he's excited. He got 14 new contacts in a what like a two hour time span that could potentially become customers of his over the next
How
few
did
months.
you source those leads?
Ah, we did it the old-fashioned way, not door to door per se, but building to building. So we didn't go to homes. We went into the town center, and there's always people working in, on these plazas, and on every building there's people working. And I felt instead of trying to stop people walking by, which I hate that. I hate when people try to stop me when I'm walking through the town. You like to promote something. I don't care. I just need to go where I'm going. So I figured let's target the people who have a reason to be still at rest, not walking about, and expect people to come to them. So we went to store owners and business owners and people with their shops and stalls, and literally just I had him print out some pictures with information from his product catalog and then laminate it so it's pretty handy. It's not just paper, so it won't tear very easy from a lot of handling. And we just go out and we say, hey, we're doing some market research. That's our angle. market research to find out what people in this area use in their homes, on their bodies, for their health, for energy, etc. Can we ask you a couple of quick questions? And most people, 90% of people are like, yeah, sure. Very curious. Some of them took the catalogs and started looking through, saying, I know this one. Oh, I don't know this. Oh, yeah. And long story short is they passed over their contact. So he's excited. Like he saw a magic trick. I'm like, I know. I
Yeah.
told this. It's like he saw a magic trick, like wow, and he's so excited. So I'm happy to have invested that time with him on
Yeah.
Saturday. But
That's
what
yeah.
about you?
That's so great to hear. I love hearing those types of stories because I feel like people um, focus so much online of like how do you source leads online that they miss the way that it's always been done, which is kind of what you're describing, right? Being able to go out in the public and ask people for their contact information and ask people to engage with them in conversations. And I feel like the tactic that you're saying, which is not make it about buy my product, but make it more about research, development, building rapport is the way to go. Which I mean, that's actually great to hear. I'm happy that you do that. That's not only brave of you, but I also feel like it kind of reinforces a lot of the human to human connection elements of networking that can be applicable to applying those same methodologies to online. Because people seem to think that because it's online, we're not still interacting with humans in the same way. And that's like that's like the whole point of what we're trying to accomplish to share with people is that like it's actually the same thing. It's just, you have to kind of get your mind around the mechanics associated with doing it because you can get away with a lot more online than you can in person. Because like your natural tendencies would take over where you probably get nervous or, not say certain things that nobody's there when you're online. So you could kind of build up the wrong habits, let's just say.
Yeah. So in essence, what I did was I tested out what you and I talked about last week. I
Yeah.
tested out the networking funnel: awareness, consideration, conversion. And it's proven there's no way to jump from awareness to conversion without there being some form of consideration, which is the talking slash replied stage
Yeah.
and serious conversation. And
Yeah.
so if they say no, I'm not open to consideration, it means they don't want to talk to us. That's what it
Yeah.
meant run that campaign. They didn't want to
Yeah.
talk.
Yeah.
Then there's no way would have gotten a conversion of a phone number. All right. So we
Absolutely.
got to go through all three steps
Yeah.
here. So I think I proved that on Saturday.
So that's such an interesting to kind of like piggybacking off the conversation we want to have today. Cause I love to hear that, and also it's not like the thing is you could always find somebody who is open to a conversion and jump to the conversion and it will work because they're open to the conversion. But like one that is statistically less amount of people. And also you're not setting yourself up with the right frame and diagnostics if you don't go through the funnel because, yeah, like you might reach out to somebody that is totally open to engaging and then kind of say something like, will you buy my product? And they might say, tell me more about it.
Yeah.
But that's not you're not going to get high conversions doing that. Because if you say to a lot of people that same opener, will you buy my product? Will you buy my product? Will you buy my product? Will you look at this? You'll probably get more negative energy than positive energy, although you might get some positive too. It's not about that never working, but if you can kind of get people, building comfortability, create rapport, creating awareness, it just sets you up for better, more thoughtful conversations. So yeah, I love to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what we want to talk about today is to kind of continue along that trajectory is, last week we kind of spoke about some tactics involved in like, how do you reliably dive deeper into getting a serious conversation. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but I kind of want to start transitioning towards the next step of the funnel, which is conversion. How do you start transitioning prospects off of LinkedIn? Because if you can source leads and then you can open up conversations and, obtain the skill set of being able to parse them into the consideration stage, eventually you do want to, we're here to make money, network, service people, sell products and services. So you do want to be able to convert them. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Like, how do you know when it's time to hop on a call and drive forward into the conversion process?
Yep, that's right. So there's always signals, telltale signs, and I'm sure you know this, but people will kind of self-select and self-identify a lot of the times. If somebody's excited about a product, it's not too hard to get on a call with them. Sometimes they're on the fence, and you just need to just do this, just blow, or just tip them with your little pinky, poop, and they pick a side. They fall to the left or to the right, right? So, but getting them up to that point is super important. And so, hey, I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah,
If
let's
you have
do
something
it.
you want to
Okay.
showcase.
Yeah, let's do it. So this is kind of a recap a little bit of last week, but what we talked about is most people stall out in the talking phase on LinkedIn. And it's not because necessarily the prospect wasn't a fit, but because they missing the signal to move the conversation forward. Similar to what you said, they might just need a little bit of a push, but people don't see the signal. And because they don't see the signal, they don't know what to say or what to do to, progress it. And remember, this isn't about pitching, it's about that progression. So if you're not picking up the signal and don't know how to do the progression, you're going to wind up staying in the talking area. And maybe you might even drive the conversation forward to getting a serious conversation, which is what we talked about last week. But what's the next step? How do you continue to progress towards what I like to call like the scheduling process, which is kind of, for me, usually trying to get people onto networking calls, discovery calls. So you want to start transitioning the prospects into the next stage of the funnel. So as a recap, we've talked about this a lot, but we want to focus on progression over pitching. And remember, the goal isn't to convert in the DMs. It's about qualifying curiosity. So in order to do that, you want to think of it like this. This is, a slightly different version of that same funnel. How do you build rapport? How do you diagnose relevance and then offer a next step? So honing in, you could even call it like a funnel within a funnel. We have awareness, consideration, conversion. Well, when we're in the consideration moving towards conversion, the way that we want to do that, especially on LinkedIn, is we want to open up conversations and try to build rapport, which it sounds like you're even doing that in person. And then you want to diagnose relevance by asking them some diagnostic questions like we talked about last week. And then if you feel good about the engagement, well, then it's on us to be as proactive networkers to offer a next step. Like we want to lead people towards a progression. So that's kind of the framework in which we want to apply how we're going to progress leads on LinkedIn. So I always like to start with, before we get to what to do, what not to do. Let's analyze kind of what people do in this situation with some examples so we could kind of anchor on like what not to do. The worst thing that you can do is rush the interaction. This is what I see all the time. And we've even seen that last week when we showed some examples. And I think we spoke about the reason we thought that they were rushing the interaction is because they're using very templated messages. And that was even so you could automate messages, or they're just using spray and pray tactics of using the same template for everybody. And so what I like to say is what not to do is if your message can go to anyone, meaning it's a template, then it shouldn't go to anyone. Because if you're just continuously using the same template over and over again with no personalization, then it makes it a little bit harder to build rapport, which is what we spoke about the goal being, to progress, build rapport, create awareness. It's a lot easier if you're personalizing it. So here's what I want to do to kind of start this. Let's take a look at this message, read it out loud, and then you could kind of give me your thoughts on what you think about this message. So, they sent a connection request. I say, thanks for asking to connect. What led you to reach out to me? And then here's their answer. Thank you for your polite response and accepting my connection. It has been surprisingly hard to connect with entrepreneurs on LinkedIn due to all the noise. As a public benefit corporation, we're on a mission to make a difference in the lives of small business owners. Being a business owner is hard, so we are trying to provide a range of managed business services that make it less painful. Our current marketing campaign is an effort to bring awareness of the risk of cybersecurity to small businesses. Approximately 8% of small businesses ended in 2023 because of a cybersecurity incident. I would love to learn more about your entrepreneurial journey and see if there's a way we can work together to broaden our impact on the world. Let me know if you're open to chatting sometime in the next few weeks. Thoughts?
Hmm. I feel overwhelmed. Hey, this is so much, man. This is a long message, man. Jeez. Okay, all right, but they did respond and they thanked you for a polite response. But there's a
TLDR?
few assumptions. Yeah, TLDR, too long, didn't read. But there are a few assumptions in here that I don't think are necessarily accurate for everyone. I think they're painting the interaction or framing it from their perspective that being an entrepreneur or being a business owner is hard. All right, not for everybody. For some people, even if there is difficulty, there's still enjoyment. I think for a lot of people, right? So yeah, it may be hard, but not necessarily in the way that they're pitching. So I think they're framing the interaction in such a way so as to make their solution look good, even if the solution isn't relevant or accurate. I don't care for cybersecurity. Even if being a business owner is hard, I don't care about cybersecurity and so on and so forth. That's not my concern. So I think there's a little bit more of a conversation that needs to be had before jumping on a call, because this
Yeah.
would be a waste of my time to jump on a call about cybersecurity because I don't have that need. So I think it's a little like you said. I think it feels rushed.
Yep. Perfect. So I totally agree with you. This is a good example of what I said not to do, which is that if your message can go to anybody. So I even hear you where it's not, messages can't go to everyone. So if you have these templated messages where they would say everybody should get, because it's a templated message, it's they're following a formula that then after somebody connects with them, they're sending a introductory, template of this is what we're doing. This is all about us. This is what a lot of people do on LinkedIn. But if it can go to anyone, then don't send it to anyone because this isn't relevant to everybody. There's no such thing as relevance to everybody. You want to figure out how to build rapport. So common mistakes.
Mm.
Vague compliments and links. We've seen that in the past. This didn't have any vague compliments or links, but we've seen that in prior messages. One of the reasons I picked this message is because on the surface, this isn't like a bad message. It's not like they're not sending random things or like, even asking for a meeting. They're seemingly sincere in what they're trying to do. I would say that it's slightly pushy, but it's also not overly pushy. I agree that it's overwhelming context because they haven't built up rapport. It's way too long. And I think the biggest marketing takeaway from this is they're focusing so much on what's in it for you, but not what's in it for them. Meaning like they're focusing on what they want out of it, but not really focusing on the relevance for the other person. So you walk away as the receiving end, similar to what you just said, as I don't feel like I really need cybersecurity right now. Um, you know, just because cybersecurity is relevant, generally speaking, but if you don't have a lot of users, if you're not at the right life cycle of a business, probably wouldn't necessarily be relevant to you. So they're so focused on themselves. Hey, I'm running a campaign for this reason. This is what we do. I'm trying to give you all this information, but not really too focused on the relevance for the end consumer. So because of that, they're not doing diagnostics. What they're doing is pushing out messages and not really thinking about how to pull people in. So that is what not to do. So I want to give another example of what does work. This message, hey, first name, thanks for the connection. I saw you're also building in the B2B space. Curious what's your current focus? What do you think about this?
Your current focus. It's light. It's welcoming. Feels specific. Very very specific, and I think it's fairly easy to answer. I would say it's not as overwhelming as the last one. right? Bombarding me with all the statistics as to why I need to be focused, and right, and I need to have a focus if I'm in B2B, and 50% of businesses lost focus in 2019, and right, too much, all right. But I think this is not too bad. I totally respond to this.
Right. So the conversion rate on this message would be higher than the prior one, mostly because we're not pushing out what we're doing. We're trying to pull a conversation, into us. So the question becomes, I'm not asking them about this is kind of coming from the perspective of what I thought that the cybersecurity company could have done to increase conversion rates. Instead of pushing out all this information and telling me all about you and letting me know that you're running marketing campaigns, which is very obvious, and trying to persuade me the consideration style in like an opening message, I would not do any of that. And I would just instead ask the customer to tell me kind of what's going on in a nice way, focused on some personalization, because I could tell that they're probably going after the B2B space. So what's your focus? I'm hoping that you probably say, yeah,
Okay, I'm back.
that's fine. I'm hoping that I'm hoping that these people would, the recipient of this would say, I'm trying to scale my company and I could really use some cybersecurity experts. My focus is on cybersecurity, but I'm letting the user make that determination on relevance. And then depending on what the response is, then I could kind of take the conversation, adjust accordingly. So the idea is I'm just trying to get talking replied, and then I can drive it a little bit more serious. So why does this work? You've said it a lot, I've said it, but just to kind of anchor into the point, we're leveraging conversation starters versus pushing marketing messages out. We're trying to personalize each interaction with relevancy. We're trying to build rapport before suggesting anything. And we're leading with curiosity and not trying to be pushy. Those characteristics is what make this message have a higher conversion rate than the other one. Make sense?
Yeah. Good.
Cool. So let's talk about how do you know when it's time to progress. So now that we kind of saw what not to do and what to do, how do you know, based off of how the conversation is going, on when it's time to be a little bit more pushy, proactive, to make a suggestion for a next step? What I like to think is you want to look for the green lights. And it's somewhat subjective here. So there's no right or wrong answer, but I'm looking for, are they asking questions? To me, if I respond, are they asking me questions? That's to me a green flag, like they're interested.
Yeah.
They reveal problems or goals based off the questions that I asked. If I ask a diagnostic question, they reveal a relevant answer. They do say I'm struggling with cybersecurity, as an example. Or they engage consistently. We've acknowledged receipt of messages, exchanged conversions, or exchanged some back and forth. It's no longer feels new. We feel like there's some substance to the dialogue. Maybe they get curious about what you do. Once I ask certain questions, it's like, well, what's your involvement? What are you trying to do? Right. So now all of a sudden I have engagement from them, that there's some rapport. Even if they're not asking me questions, it's like, well, are they trading thoughtful messages? Like, even if, for example, if I asked what's your focus on, do they answer with, I'm not sure, or do they answer with, hey, let me show you that I'm really focused and I'm really focused on this, this, and this, right? It's thoughtful. It kind of demonstrates that they're somewhat qualified at that point, depending on what they say, obviously, too. They might even give me a thoughtful answer, but say, but I'm not interested in cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. You got to play with what you're getting, but what you're trying to do is to open up the conversation enough to be able to feel like you got some green flags to progress. So here are some examples of obvious signals, right? So we could anchor this in more obvious, and then we'll get to subtle. Here's some obvious signals that I think are green flags that would enable me to easily feel like I could get the progress towards a conversion. Somebody said, to me, like leads are super inconsistent. I'm not sure what's off, goes up and down. That's demonstrating that they're revealing problems that then it makes it easy to kind of say, well, why don't we hop on a call, or why don't we talk about that? Why don't we solve that problem? If somebody told me that they loved my post, or they reached out to me because they saw office hours, or, an inbound lead, well, at that point, I feel like they're giving me permission to be able to ask them if, hey, do you want to connect? Do you want to have a conversation? I feel like they've told me that they want to network with me. So I view that as a green flag. How do you help clients with this? I get this all the time, right? If you're having a conversation, somebody asks that question, what exactly do you do? How do you help clients with this? Once they've asked me that question, I feel like, well, let's talk about it. Let me, instead of me trying to throw up everything, how to answer that question, it makes it a lot easier from a time management stance to start thinking about how do we transition towards a real life conversation to progress to answer that question in a more thoughtful way. And also it'll help me personalize it so I can learn a little bit more about what you do too. So I know how do you help clients with this is somewhat broad. We want to focus on, well, what's the relevancy based off of what you're trying to accomplish. So I don't want to say do a lot of video podcast stuff if that's not what you want to do. So there's different ways that you could help clients with marketing. So we want to progress, trying to grow but stuck, interested to learn more. What are you working on? When these are examples of obvious signals that you are in control to transition. But let's talk about some subtle signals. This is where I think people really miss opportunities, because the natural inclination, especially on LinkedIn, when you can't read people's body language, is you make up that they're not interested when that might or may not be true. So here's an example. Somebody says something that is short, not sure where to start. Is that welcoming? Is that short?
Yeah, it's short. It shows a bit of vulnerability as well. It shows
Totally.
how they don't have it all figured out, and so if you
Right.
read between the lines, I think it's sort of an invitation to share perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree. So what I like to do in these types of things that are more subtle is I want to try to engage interest by slowly starting to progress towards, inquiring whether or not they're interested in having a conversation. So, being able to say something like totally understandable. Sometimes a quick call helps bring clarity. Can we connect for 15 minutes? Just to kind of gauge interest. So, they gave me a subtle signal and I took the opportunity to gauge interest. Another example. We've been meaning to explore that, just haven't gotten around to it.
Meaning to explore that, just haven't gotten around to it. Okay, that sounds like a warm response. That's in my mind. That sounds like an invitation to get something booked in the calendar.
It's
Share
subtle,
perspective
but you
around
want
it.
to,
Yeah,
I think it's subtle, but it's worth pursuing. So
I would say that for sure.
yeah. So what I would say is there's no rush at all, but if it's helpful, I'd appreciate an opportunity to walk you through a few ideas together sometime this week or next week. So, I'm trying to anchor in some type of time period. I'm not rushing them. It doesn't have to be today. It doesn't have to be this week. It doesn't have to be next week. It could even be next month. But the idea is that when I see that, I don't want to just assume that they're not interested or really be pushy. It's just now I view it as a subtle invitation to see whether or not they're interested in hopping on a call and having a conversation about it once I've obviously progressed them. Okay. So
And
last, yeah.
Colin, I might even throw in a bit of maybe an outside resource or something of value, or maybe a tip or two that directly addresses their issue, just to kind of feed them some crumbs, before throwing the whole loaf of bread, just to whet their appetite in a sense with that response.
Yeah.
Say, hey,
I think that's a great idea. I think there's lots of different ways that you can progress. The importance is to pick up the signal. But I agree that I call pre-selling mechanisms, like pre-selling content or resources to have at your disposal for your particular industry is always a great idea. The flip side of that is sometimes I find that depending on where they're at, especially in like a subtle signal where they're not sure, potentially giving them too many resources in that moment when you're not understanding of relevancy yet, because you don't understand their level of urgency in these types of signals. You don't really understand whether or not they're a buyer, what the seriousness is of their willingness to potentially engage with an offer. So you don't want to overwhelm somebody until you feel like a resource is actually going to be of value to them. So I'm not saying it's kind of, you got to judge it based off of the
Yeah,
individual, their
judgment call.
background, their profile, like what they've kind of said. But yeah, I love resources, right? Trying to provide value is always the goal. Cool. So last one. Yeah, we've looked at a few options, but haven't found the right fit. So yeah, I view that as a nice subtle signal. So the response, got it. You're still exploring. I'd be happy to compare notes live. Would a short chat be helpful? Right? Trying to have this subtle signal open to see if I'm trying to qualify curiosity. Like, are you interested now that we've gotten here in us meeting to just feel each other out? That's kind of the way that I'm thinking about it. How do you I think the answer is yes. If not, no problem. I'm not being pushy, but I'm here if you want to compare notes, especially if you're demonstrating yourself as a thought leader in a particular area. Cool. Any other
Cool.
thoughts, feelings on this?
I especially love that closing. Would a short chat be helpful? That
Yeah.
word helpful signals something in the human brain that lowers the guard, lowers the defenses, because from we're teeny tiny tots, we've been asking for help.
Yeah.
And so I think it brings us back to that state of vulnerability where we almost want to say yes, if somebody asks if it would be helpful.
Yeah.
Right? We don't want to say no, because when somebody offers help, it's a universal sign of kindness. So it's almost like being a jerk to say no if somebody asks you if something would be helpful,
Yeah.
for you.
So
So
I love that. Which kind of brings us to, the next aspect of this is that you want to make it as easy as possible for people to say yes and actually show up. So just piggybacking off of what you just said, the reason that I think it's really important to not skip the consideration stage, other than obviously the human psychology element of it, it's really important to ensure that people understand what the agenda is going to be when you get on a networking call. Otherwise, you're kind of creating like a stranger danger feeling, right? We don't want to get on calls with strangers. When you get when you do you get like spam calls in Jamaica? This is like a big thing now in America, where it's like you get these calls that are just robo of you don't know who it is. Nobody wants to answer those calls.
yeah.
In
In fact, I saved one of those phone numbers as do not answer, and then I named the
Yeah,
telecommunications company that sends this robot calling, and it's like it's not even a solid offer. It's like it doesn't make sense to me. So I
yeah.
just label it do not answer.
We get these all the time in America. It's actually getting problematic, but the reason is because it's when we were all kids, our parents told us don't go with strangers, right?
Mm,
So it's ingrained in every human to have some guard up. So the point of the consideration stage before you get to the conversion is to slowly break those guards down. And the best way that I have found to do that is obviously build rapport, progress, and then extend an invitation to be helpful, extend an invitation to chat about a particular topic. Even if you're not, if the goal is to kind of just put a face to a name or just meet for, to introduce yourself, at least there's an agenda. See, the
yeah.
problem with that cybersecurity example was they're trying to meet, but I don't understand what the agenda is. It sounds like the agenda is a pitch lab. Like they just want to tell me what they want to do, which is why you were turned off by it. Like, I don't really want to be involved in a situation where someone's pitching me something that I don't feel like I need. So that's a universal feeling. So the idea is, how do you make it easy to say yes Well, the answer to that is have an agenda. Like, make the agenda obvious. Make the agenda be that we're going to talk about something that we think is going to be helpful for you. Because then not only are you going to probably say yes to the networking call, but you're also going to show up and hopefully have value in the exchange, which is kind of the next part of this. Is the goal is to not necessarily have someone say yes, it's to have an actual call completed, because there's oftentimes people might say yes, but then they might not show up.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that not only are you not being pushy, but that you got to actually want the call to go through. And so this part of the piece is, obviously the skill set of getting to the yes, but this is where I believe that technology comes in super handy. You know how I feel about automating outreach, but because the reason is because I don't think the robots are as good at what we've spoken about as a normal, genuine, like, curiosity will be. And you also see through the what not to do and then what to do. The what to do is actually a lot simpler than people think. It's not writing all that stuff, but just asking somebody what they're focused on. Just asking somebody if they want help. It's actually not that overly complicated. It's just saying it at the right sequence. And then, not being pushy and, being genuine, especially if you start from the premise of you do good sourcing of leads, by the time it gets here, you feel pretty good about wanting to actually get them on a call and, chit chat and network. So this part of the process is where I'm a big proponent of technology, automation. The reason is because we're not automating friendships, we're automating friction. We actually want them to show up. So, obviously having some scheduling software that automates notifications, reminders, that syncs with a conference call, like a Zoom or like a calendar, that helps you figure out the time zone differences, which is a big thing of networking on LinkedIn, making sure that if you're in EST, but you're networking someone in PST or Central or in Europe or in India, that you're ensuring that the right times work for both people. Well, software is great at this, much better than potentially you are as an individual doing the administration side of things. So I'm a big proponent, and I feel like for certain people this is obvious, but for a lot of people I've met, this is not so obvious because they aren't as familiar with how to automate the booking process and automating the administration side of scheduling meetings. And so because of that, the idea of taking meetings in a conference become maybe a little bit technically challenging to understand what to do. But if you set this up once, it's actually quite easy to be able to automate all of this, right? So using software like Calendly is a great option. They also have
The paid version. Let me just put that out there. The paid version. I've actually.
You don't need to pay for Calendly; it's free.
No, I mean to get reminders sent, you need the paid version. So
You
I've
can do it
been.
for free in email.
Pardon?
You can use it for free with reminders in email and sync to a calendar.
Oh, you get email reminders free?
Yeah. I think you have to pay for SMS text. There's paid versions to get more automated texting, but to get reminders for emails to your guests and sync to your calendar is free.
Awesome. Well, tell me what you think about this, because I've had this ideology when I first got in business. I had mentors, and when they book a meeting, we're not getting a reminder. Right? Nobody's reminding us. It's not sending us a text or email because they're looking to see if we're going to show up and we're going to prioritize the meeting in the same way. And so I've created, I don't know, I've just created this culture around, my business is that whenever I'm having a meeting, I'm not calling to remind someone. And I don't know if it's good or if it's bad, right? Because people sometimes they're not tech savvy. They're not checking emails. They're not setting their own alarms and reminders. And so I end up having no shows with people, even potential clients. And I'm like, I would expect better. You know what I mean? I'd expect more
and
effort.
And I totally get that. And my point in this slide is to say that the burden should be on you as the administrator to make it like obvious that they're going to show up. And the way you do that is if you integrate with a Calendly, and Google has this now for free, and I think Outlook has it for free, similar software. There are paid versions that you can optimize for multiple calendars, multiple booking links, for example. That's where it gets paid. If you're like, well, I want to set up a 30-minute meeting and an hour meeting option, all within a booking link, then okay, there's thresholds there. But what I like to do is, my feelings on this is, I don't even send out booking links to people. I can see my calendar, especially as an individual, and then I can just book the meeting through the Calendly link myself. But let's actually just show an example of Calendly. Here's like a booking page for a Calendly link. So the benefit of this is you can set up an object, right? This is free, 30-minute meeting. You can sync in the back end your instructions for meeting, whether or not that's Zoom, whether or not that is Google Meet or some other software. But Zoom's also free, at least for a 40-minute meeting. You don't even have to pay. So you don't have to pay for Calendly. You don't have to pay for Zoom. You just have to configure all this up. And then you could change the time zone. So yes, theoretically, you could send this out to somebody and have them book. And sometimes that might be easier for various situations. Sometimes if you're networking on LinkedIn, some people might ask for a booking link where I choose. And obviously, like, I'm not opposed to somebody choosing. But what I like to do is I like to offer up times to say, hey, I'm available either Wednesday or Thursday of next week. And in EST or PST or CST, so I could cater to their schedule. Are you available? Oh, I see you're in CST. I'm available at 2 p.m. CST. It's not that I don't have to do the calculations in my head. I can just change the time zone to Central Time, and then it tells me what it is. And then when I click on that 30-minute meeting, all I need is an email, and then I can schedule the event. It pops it on my Google Calendar or my Outlook or whatever integration of software you use in the back end. And then not only is that person going to receive an email with the instructions, but they're going to get reminded through email. And then also, if they just press one button that basically says, yes, accept it, then their calendar integrations, most people use Google Calendar or Outlook. So they're going to get multiple reminders because they get reminders from their Google Calendar. They get reminders from Calendly. Your meeting is coming up in an hour. Doing this type of stuff optimizes the process by which there's less excuses for them not to show up. And this is a big deal because, like what you said, otherwise people might not show up. And you obviously want to optimize for their ability, make it easy for them to show up, because if they don't show up, then obviously there's a qualification of the fact that maybe it's not the best prospect.
Yeah, I tell them bye-bye. You didn't show, or I address it. But yeah, I maybe need to utilize these tools. Give people more, I guess, a higher success rate.
It's super important. And we could talk more about the details of how to set that up at another time, the configurations. But it's really easy. It's free. There's no excuse. It's just a matter of incorporating it into your routine to kind of optimize your ability to make this a lot easier from an administration standpoint on how to have online conferences. So the idea of booking lots of different meetings become not burdensome, but you could focus more on the messaging aspect of it to get the yes, and then automate the process of making sure that people actually show up. Cool. So this is what I wanted to this is part one of a 2-part series where we'll talk a little bit more about how do you present yourself on the calls, right? Because we've kind of operated in this networking funnel of how do you source leads, how do you open up conversations, how do you drive them towards the yes, you automate your booking, and then you get on a call. And now you got to show up. There's not a mechanics as much. It's like it's a different thought process. But I want to just kick off what we'll talk about next week, which is this is my strategy on how I've found to automate the process of networking on LinkedIn. So obviously we start with the DMs, and there's a skill set associated with that, which we've been talking about and we'll continue to talk about. What I like to do is to break out the networking process into a two-step process. 15 minutes up front, 45 minutes on the back end. The reason I do this is because here's my philosophy on networking. I hope that everybody is an A or B. I hope everybody can help grow my business and I could partner with them. I'm going in with the premise of I hope everybody's great, understanding that that's probably not the case, but I hope that everybody should be willing to at least get an hour of my time. That's I want to give you an hour of my time to see if we can sync up and prosper together. Now, not everybody I know is going to deserve an hour of my time, so I'm hesitant to let people have that up front. So it's one thing that you're DMing me nice. I get to qualify you a little bit to see whether or not I think that you're even willing, if you're, of like value to get on a call at all. I'm in control of choosing that. But let's say I think that you are. Well, now I'm going to judge you based off of your ability to show up. I'm going to judge you based off of some, are you showing up? Is it the same person that I was talking to? Which, might not be in today's world. Do they share their story in the same way that I felt like their story represented in the DMs and in their profile? I'm still qualifying them. So because of that, they're still not qualified to me until they show up on a call and I could kind of hear them out. So because of that, I like to break this up like from the start. It also creates a lot less pressure on me because I don't go into these 15-minute like discovery calls with the intention of pitching anything. I'm still qualifying. So it's like I'm more excited to show up and see
where it goes.
Yeah, where it goes. Like you never know where it goes. So, I'm very casual in the discovery calls. It's curiosity led, and I'm trying to unpack things together, usually trying to set up some agenda, even if the agenda is like just putting a face to a name and, hearing what they're working on. That's fine.
Yeah.
My also tip, and we'll get into this a little bit more next week, is I like to actually keep these at 15 minutes. I'll sometimes book my calendar for 30. So if we're having good rapport, I'm happy to extend it to 30 if it makes sense, because in my head, they get an hour. But if they want to use the first 30 minutes, that's fine. But I've also been in a lot of situations where I want to cut it off. They're 10 minutes late.
They're malfunctioning, Colin.
Let's just say it's malfunctioning. And because it's malfunctioning, I don't even want to waste more time. And I'm in control because I try to set up what I say is going to be a 15-minute call. And if that's all we have and they don't show up and I don't feel like it's a good fit, I'm just going to cut my losses and say, that's fine. I'll just move on to the next. Sometimes I have great discovery calls that wind up being 30 minutes just because I'm enjoying myself and I'm enjoying the interaction. And I feel like I'm learning. I'm hoping that they're learning. They're sharing some good information. And then I'm in control by what do I want to do next. And, the strategy call is my segmentation into what I think of more as a sales process. Like that's my opportunity to now, I have all this information. I've sourced leads. I've chatted with them. I qualified them. I understand where they're actually at, not like where I thought that they were at. And now I feel potentially ready to see if I could set up a sales call that I like to call more like a strategy call. It's more about aligning interest at that point. They might be thinking like wanting to learn more about what I do, like how it might fit. We need a longer conversation. I think I have found that breaking this up into like a multi-step process with multiple touch points has been way more not only like conversion minded, but it also allows me to flow people, progress them in a way that lets me show up more effectively. I have found when I tried to do all this in one call, you're kind of like, a lot of these, they're strangers. They're not qualified. You're not ready to understand what to pitch. You might need to also, I've learned this the hard way. A lot of people will show up in the discovery call. I've shared this with you before, saying that they're struggling with something that wasn't so clear on their profile. So it just kind of threw me off a little bit. Not saying that I can't like still help. It's just, I almost have to rethink how I would help based off of the way that I originally thought that I was going to be helped. So setting up a secondary call, I've just found is a much higher conversion way to kind of network and automate the process.
Yeah. I've never closed a deal in one call ever. Yeah, it's always been multiple calls. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
My first call is normally 30 minutes, and then I do 45 minutes after, but kind of like the 15 and 45 mix. I think 15 minutes would leave them wanting even more. So,
Yeah. And also, like I said, I usually book a 30-minute meeting on my calendar, but I tell them it's 15 minutes. And then even if I said it was 15 minutes, but the calendar reminder says 30, it leaves an out where I'm a little bit in control of I could always cut it off and say I have a different meeting or I gotta go. That way, you don't want the last thing I don't want to be stuck in a 30-minute meeting after 5-10 minutes if I see that the person isn't a good fit for like us to work together in any meaningful way. Not saying it always has to end in a work relationship, but if they're not even showing up where I just feel like it's a little sketchy or they're not sharing information, which sometimes you get a vibe pretty quickly that doesn't really translate to the DMs. That's kind of what I'm looking for. So next week, this was part one of the transitioning prospects off of LinkedIn. I really want to focus on how do you show up for those discovery calls. I think we could kind of elongate kind of like what the agenda is, how you present yourself, how do you build rapport, because this process of transitioning prospects off of LinkedIn is mechanically a little bit different than to do this successfully. I find to actually drive revenue a little bit different than networking, because networking on LinkedIn, keeping it on LinkedIn is about networking over sales. But obviously, when you're taking discovery calls, you're starting to transition towards sales. You want to show up a particular way. You want to have an agenda. You want to be prepared. You want to be good at answering objections or staying in a certain frame when people ask you things that you may or may not be ready for. It's how do you prepare for that is kind of the thing that I am excited to kind of talk a little bit more about next week.
yeah, nice. I'm excited as well because this my sales calls. I'm not going to say too much, but I show up prepared. I show up prepared. I have my notes, I have my agenda, and I'm happy to showcase one of my templates next week that I use for calls.
Cool. Yeah, I would love to see that. We could kind of add that into the training. Yeah, I find that I hope that after that conversation, people have a little bit more confidence in knowing how to show up for those calls. Because I understand the going back to the stranger danger aspect of it. When you show up and you don't know who the person is, there's like an elevated, heightened nervousness that comes with that.
Yeah,
But if you can break it up where you kind of understand what the micro conversion is associated with the discovery call, like what you're trying to get out of it, and if what you're trying to get out of it is not a conversion, right? Because you're still in or step one of a conversion. It's you're in control on whether or not you want to progress it further. So when you have that frame, it helps you show up the right way. And once you can show up the right way, you can gather the skill set of finding leads, opening conversations, networking, transitioning them off of LinkedIn, and then into a sales process.
Mhm. All right, great stuff. Great
Yeah.
stuff. So,
Cool.
let's tune in next week again, same time for office hours, and and dive right in. I'm excited about our conversation. Thanks a lot, Colin.
Absolutely. Look forward to it. Same time next week. We'll talk soon.